Welcome to Storm the Gates, Book 3 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy by Melinda Kucsera.
Part 9. Chapter 33. I Will Lead Them. When Guerren came to, he was underwater, and panic swelled in his chest before he remembered he was just a spirit in this realm. I can't drown. Shouldn't I float? He sank deeper in answer. Why am I sinking? It took a moment to remember, and a quick feel of his bulging pockets confirmed the gems were still safely inside. But they weighed him down, and that shouldn't be possible since he wasn't corporeal. The gems were, though. So you are magical. I knew it. Visions of all the things he could do with them dance in his head until he saw shadows in the water above him. The shadows were human-shaped. Where are you going? Guerren clawed at the water and kicked his feet like he did before, and he slowly ascended through layers of seawater that sparkled because of the silver flecks floating in the upper waters. I wonder what those shiny specks are. Well, he could find out later. Right now, he needed to swim and find out where his army was going, since the number of shadows swimming above him kept multiplying. Guerren swam faster until his head breached the surface. Then he paddled to stay above the water as he turned in a slow circle. Ex-gods, demons, and fallen angels alike swam toward the ship looming over them, not toward the gates. Why are you returning to the ship? He asked, but they just swam past him with their wide eyes fixed on the ship. It's like they don't even see me. Or someone controlled them. Who's controlling my army? Guerren only knew one angel who could do that, Argeniel. How many could he control? Guerren scanned the sea for him and stared at the giant blue scaly leg that moved in front of him instead. He followed the leg up to a thick body with spines sticking out of its back. Is that a dragon? The giant blue creature growled something, then a body hit the water. Was the dragon pulling people off the gates and chucking them into the water? It sure looked that way from down here when another body splashed down in front of Guerren. Why is there even a splash when we're not corporeal? We must be partially corporeal. Guerren paddled backward to avoid a body falling toward him. This one had blonde hair and a lion hammered into her breastplate. Lionestra landed on her back, but she stared off like all the rest and rolled over and swam for the boat. Well, that confirmed that Argeniel was here, and he took over my army. I must take it back. Where was that angel? He scanned the sky this time, and there was a silhouette that might be a person up there. Unfortunately, Guerren didn't have wings, so he couldn't fly. Maybe I can get his attention another way. Guerren glanced around for something to climb. Maybe he could jump off something and fall on the angel who stole his army. Only the crow's nest looked high enough for that, since the sort of person-shaped silhouette hovered over the deck. Guerren grimaced as he swam toward the ship like all the others. When he reached it, he climbed the net and kept his head down as he pretended to be just another thrall. The net felt like it went on forever until he finally touched the railing and threw an arm over, followed by a leg. Guerren tipped over the rail and landed on the deck beside the other thralls and reveled in the feeling of being out of the water. But he couldn't rest for long because none of the thralls did, and he didn't want to stand out or give Argeniel any warning. Since he wasn't a thrall, he studied their stiff movements for a moment before rising and emulating them. Guerren shambled to the mast with the crow's nest at its top and grasped the ropes that dangled from the furled sails. Those damned gems in his pockets weighed him down again, but he gritted his teeth and climbed as the ship swayed beneath him every time a wave hit the hull. Hand over hand, he pulled himself up, and his fingers ached from the unaccustomed work, but thoughts of Argeniel in control of his army drove him to climb faster so he could reclaim it. The higher he climbed, the more the deck shrank below him, and that might have freaked out a lesser man. Thankfully, Guerren didn't hate heights, but he threw an arm over the platform perched atop the mast, grateful the climbing part of his plan was over. Guerren hauled himself over the edge and froze when something touched his shoulder.
What are you doing?
Natalie asked. He glanced up and there was the Versace hovering above him so they could tap on his shoulder with their toes. Natalie held a dark-skinned angel who hugged Argeniel tightly to his chest. Argeniel looked drained and verging on unconsciousness, if his fluttering eyelids were any indication. What does it look like I'm doing? I'm obviously scouting for you. That's what friends without wings do, right? Guerren threw in a cheeky grin to sell that explanation, while his thoughts spun. He threw me in the spire. I escaped, of course, because there's no prison that can hold me for long. Everything inside him urged him to attack Argeniel and win control of the army. But we fought the adversary together and sent him back to hell. And that made them allies, right? That victory still made his heart sing with joy. Guerren steadied himself against the mast, and his grip on the situation was as tenuous as his perch.
Are you okay? Because you're acting weird.
Natalie looked at him with concern in their pink eyes. Why does he look like death warmed over? Guerren waved at Argeniel, but the angel didn't look at him or acknowledge him. He just stared off and mumbled under his breath. Guerren shuddered, and he was glad the Book of Names returned to its owner, if that was the price of using it.
Because he's trying to control a lot of creatures.
Natalie descended until they were at eye level. Why is he doing that? Guerren asked, just to keep the Versailles talking. He needed time to pull himself together and fight the urge to attack his friends. I don't have that many friends, and I'm not sacrificing any just to get an army. Maybe I would have in the past, but I'm not that man anymore. I've learned the value of friendship. Now, he just needed his nature to comply with that and quit urging him to attack. Until it did, he couldn't let go of the platform, lest the urge overtake him and make him do something he'd regret. It was damned hard to go against one's nature, but it was a fight worthy of an ex-war god.
We need them to stay aboard so we can send the ship back to the Grey Between. Then we need to get the army to the portal to hell and make them go through it. But we're not worrying about that part of the plan just yet, since we need to get them across the sea first.
Natalie said, and they seemed to be oblivious to his internal struggle.
But all ideas are welcome, so if you have any, say so.
What will you do with that army after you take command?
Argeniel asked earlier in the Grey Between, and his voice echoed in Guerren's head. I'll lead it, of course. That's what a general does, Guerren told him then. But that wasn't enough to satisfy the angel, so he'd asked the question another way.
Where will you lead it?
Then Guerren didn't have an answer, but he did now. He smiled as the wind ruffled his hair, and extended his hand until he could catch Argeniel's hand and squeeze it to get his fading attention. You can let go now. You don't need to control them anymore.
What are you saying?
Natalie asked, and there was a warning in their voice that came across loudly and clearly. Don't mess with the angels. Since he didn't plan to mess with anyone who didn't deserve it, he ignored the warning. Natalie was just being overprotective, but Argeniel looked like he needed some protection right now, so that was okay. Back when we were in the Grey Between, you both asked where I'll lead the army once I'm in command. Well, I've got a destination now. I'll lead it to hell. Guerren squeezed his hand again. Let go of the army. Let me take command. I'll lead it straight to hell. I promise. You can count on me. He winked in case his argument wasn't enough. After all, Argeniel was gorgeous if one liked moody angels who brooded too much.
Do it.
A woman said, as an angel shot upward from the deck until she reached them. But she wasn't Thaniel. Who was this angel with coal-rimmed eyes? Who are you? Guerren let go of Argeniel's hand so he could point at her.
She's a friend. Her name's Layla, and she's helping us.
Natalie struggled to hold on to the other two angels.
I can't hold them anymore.
Argeniel sagged, like his bones dissolved and nothing held him together.
Then don't,
said the dark-skinned angel that Natalie didn't introduce as he slipped from her grasp and blurred out for a moment. When he reappeared, he cradled an unconscious Argeniel in his arms.
Do your thing, war god.
The angel glared at Guerren like this was all his fault. It probably was. How much of this would have happened if he hadn't snuck into the library of forbidden knowledge and stolen that damned book? That was something to think about later. Right now, he had an army to take command of. I'm on it. Don't you worry about that. I was born for this. Guerren saluted the angels, then stepped off the platform and fell to the deck. Thankfully, he wasn't fully corporeal, so it didn't hurt. He didn't even land with an almighty bang, and that just felt anticlimactic after all that climbing. Oh well, he'd just have to make an impression another way. Fire burned in his gut like the old days. Is my power returning? Guerren cupped his hands, and a fireball appeared in each palm. Now this was more like it. He juggled them for a moment as he surveyed the groggy creatures, rubbing their eyes as they shambled about the deck and threw off Argeniel's control. You lost. Heaven won this round. But victory was never possible against angels and dragons. It's time we took this fight back to the person who sent you on this fool's errand. Guerren met the multicolored eyes of the demons, ex-gods and fallen angels on deck, and his desire to lead them dwindled. As speeches went, that wasn't one of his best, but it was short and to the point. point. He no longer wanted to lead them, but a promise was a promise. Lionestra shoved through the crowd gathered around Guerren.
What are you suggesting?
She asked when she reached him. I suggest we leave while we can. Guerren snuffed out the fireballs, since he didn't need them right now, and turned up his natural charisma instead.
And go where? Back to hell?
Lionestra laughed at the very idea. Yes, that's where we belong. If you don't like it there, then stop being part of the things you don't like and start being part of the changes you want to see. As Guerren said that, he felt their loyalties changing.
What about the adversary?
Someone asked, and others joined in. They all wanted an answer to the same question, but the ship lurched, throwing everyone on the deck. Then it shot backwards so fast the sea and the sky blurred, and an invisible force pressed them all against the deck. Well, maybe not everyone. Since he didn't see Natalie or Arginil, did his friends abandon him?
Chapter 34, To the Gray Between. Thaniel grabbed the demon running up the beach and tossed her to a guardian angel flying by. Is that all of them? As Thaniel asked. She scanned the wide cobbled street leading away from the beach, toward the amethyst towers that grew taller the further one traveled from the beach. Azrael landed in front of her.
I think so. I didn't see any others on the streets.
How hard did he actually look? Did he just fly around looking at anyone on the streets, or did he check the buildings with entrances at street level? Azrael wasn't the most observant angel in the ranks, and he did best in situations that didn't have many shades of gray or messy things like emotions. Thaniel supposed this was one of those situations where even he shouldn't have any problems telling apart those who belonged in heaven from those who don't. After all, didn't the fallen ones lose their wings in the fall? Then why did she feel uneasy about his assessment? Surely someone couldn't disguise themselves and hide from him, right? Thaniel rubbed her temples. All this supposing was giving her a headache. I should check just in case someone slipped past him, but she needed to do that without him knowing that's what she was doing because he outranked her. So far, he'd forgotten that, but one wrong move and he'd remember he could order her around, and that would be the end of her detached status and her autonomy too. Maybe I shouldn't chance it. I could just trust his assessment for now and conduct a quiet inquiry later. That seemed like the best course of action now that Thaniel thought about it. So she flashed him a thumbs up like the humans on her last visit to the mortal world did when they approved something.
What's going on?
Asked a blonde archangel who landed behind Azrael. A black woman in flowing angel's robes ran after him, and she shook her head as she laid eyes on Thaniel. Oh boy, we're in trouble now. But Thaniel smiled and waved to Shonafar anyway. After all, Shonafar didn't volunteer to join the Council of Angels. She was appointed, the same as Corantus. Thankfully, he scowled at Azrael because he assumed Azrael caused whatever they thought happened. Now would be a great time to slip away. But Thaniel couldn't do that when Shonafar stalked toward her like she already knew Thaniel was hip-deep in things. Behind her, the other angels from the council hurried toward them. Damn! There went all hope of escaping before the council found out about the attack. Thaniel wished she had flown away with that last demon before the council arrived. Now, she'd have to explain everything, and that just wasn't high on her list of priorities right now. Nothing's going on now, we're just mopping up. Thaniel glanced around for someone else to escort to the ship so she could get away from the council. She especially didn't want to talk to Periel.
But something happened.
Corantus folded his muscular arms and looked at her like she was a book written in a foreign language that he could read if he stared at her hard enough. Good luck with that, because I'm not saying anything that could incriminate me. Since there was no part of her current errand that wouldn't incriminate her, Thaniel kept her mouth shut.
Yes, there was an attack on heaven, but we repelled it.
Azrael stepped in front of Thaniel and puffed out his chest as he went into full boasting mode. He's right. Thaniel widened her eyes and nodded like she was totally innocent of the whole thing, although she could have said nothing at all since Azrael raised his voice to talk over her, and he gesticulated wildly as he launched into his tale. The other members of the council gathered around him, including Periel. That's right, keep all their eyes on you. Thaniel kept nodding as she slid one foot backward, then the other, and repeated that until the surf rolled over her feet. By then, Azrael was deep into his story. Since no one called on her to provide her account, she turned and flew toward the ship. Thaniel dodged a dragon that rose from the sea and shoved his shoulder into the hind end of the ship, and it shot forward. Oh no, you don't. The residents of that ship provided the most entertainment I've had in a long time. And I'm keen to see this through to the end. Thaniel flapped her wings as fast as she could until she could grab hold of a platform thing at the top of the mainmast. She sent her wings away so they didn't create any drag and clung to the platform as the sea blurred around her. Hopefully her friends boarded before the dragons shoved the ship off. Will they push it all the way back to the gray between? A dark line wavered in front of her and a strange feeling assaulted her, making her limbs heavy. Thaniel lost her grip on the platform and plummeted toward the deck as the damned thing shot away from her. She crashed into a big scaly hand. Then it dumped her on deck.
This is a no-fly zone.
The dragon growled as she lay there, getting her bearings.
Are you okay?
Guerren asked as he appeared at her side and looked down at her. Yeah, I'm a little disoriented. Thaniel sat up and caught his hand so he could pull her to her feet. Guerren didn't let go of her hand, though. Instead, he spun her around to face ranks of demons, fallen angels, and ex-gods, all clutching at anything in reach to keep from crashing into each other and the rails.
Do you see it?
Guerren waved to them. What am I looking at? Thaniel didn't see what was so exciting or why he grinned like he just won something. Maybe seeing the dragons in action made him happy?
My army.
Guerren puffed his chest out with pride. Do they know they're your army? Thaniel pulled her hand free.
Yes, I told them so, but my speech got interrupted by the dragons. It's too bad you didn't hear it.
Guerren sighed like a proud papa. I don't believe it. Thaniel folded her arms and had to lean to stay on her feet.
Why not?
Guerren stared at her like no one ever questioned him before. Let's table this until we reach land, then you can show me your leadership over them. Thaniel didn't think it would be long until they reached the gray between, not at the speed they traveled now, and she was right. The gray between appeared on the horizon as they raced toward it. Then, moments later, the beach hove into view and the docks too. The dragons slowed down finally so they didn't crash land. Instead, the ship slipped into its dock and stopped. Now's your chance. Show me how you lead an army. Thaniel stepped aside and leaned against the railing on the opposite side, so she was out of the way. Guerren opened his mouth to deliver his orders or a speech, she'd never know which because the dragons at the rear of the ship roared and everyone on deck ran toward the front part of the boat closest to shore, just missing Guerren, and they jumped overboard.
That's right. Everyone, off the ship. Line up on shore.
Guerren shouted and waved, probably to save face since he glanced at her twice to make sure she saw he was giving orders. Thaniel clapped since that's what he wanted as she strolled over to him. You'd better hurry if you want to lead them. You know where we need them to go, right?
Yes, but I don't know where the portal is. Do you?
Guerren shifted his weight like he wanted to run after his army. Yes, it's that way. Thaniel pointed, and Guerren ran to the railing and jumped overboard. I guess I better follow him. I wonder where Entali, Arjanil, and Esariah went. She sighed and followed him, but she was quasi-corporeal here, so she recalled her wings and flew to shore to skip the whole swimming in the sea and getting wet thing. But she didn't wonder for long about her friends since the trio landed on the beach at the same time she did, so they must have been aboard somewhere. Layla landed on their other side and flung out an arm to stop them. 12 jewel-colored dragons charged out of the sea and onto the beach, roaring as they went. What are they doing? Daniel asked, as the roaring and stomping of the dragons faded enough that she didn't have to shout to be heard. This wasn't how the dragons of heaven behaved. She'd never seen them this mad, and that gave her pause. Were they taking the invasion personally? It sure looked that way. I'd better not piss them off, but that meant following the rules, and she was never good at that.
I think they're chasing the interlopers back to hell, but that's just a guess.
Ezariah shrugged. He had an arm around a tired-looking Arjanil, who leaned on him like he couldn't stand on his own right now. He really should lie down somewhere, but Arjanil looked at the hill at the end of the beach like he meant to climb it when he got the energy to try.
Speaking of hell, that's where I need to go after I find my friend. I left her in the gray between, and she's probably mad at me for that.
Layla shoved her dark hair out of her eyes, then stuck out her hand.
It's been fun, and I'll miss you all, but this is goodbye for now.
Danielle clasped her hand. It doesn't have to be goodbye. I don't have much going on right now. I could help you find your friend.
Plus, we still need to see Guerren lead someone,
Natalie added, and the Versati might be smiling behind their veil or laughing silently if their pink eyes were any indication. I also want to see that, so how about we stick together for a little little longer. Speaking of Guerren, did anyone see where he went? Thaniel let go of Layla's hand and glanced around for him. But the Exor god, the dragons, and everyone who attacked heaven disappeared over the hill, dividing the beach from the foggy gray interior of this place. The stomping of the dragons faded into silence as they stood there, just out of reach of the waves washing ashore.
I really should find my friend.
Layla glanced at the hill like she really didn't want to go near it. She didn't move, and no one else did either. It just didn't seem like a good idea to follow that many angry dragons. But they needed to go over that hill because that's where everything started, and they needed to see this through. Arjanil finally staggered toward the hill, pulling Ezariah with him, and that broke their paralysis. They summited that hill, not as strangers thrown together by happenstance and, well, boredom on Thaniel's part, but as friends, to locate Layla's friend and find out if Guerren finally found his army. How do we find your friend in all that fog? Thaniel asked when they reached the top. All 12 dragons stood heads and shoulders taller than the fog bank, covering everything, but nothing else stood out from it.
I could try to use magic to locate her.
But Layla didn't sound convinced that would work.
You could start by calling her name. She'll hear us if she's close to the hill we're standing on. What's her name?
Natalie asked as they scanned the foggy plain too.
Her name is Rosalie.
Layla cupped both hands around her mouth and shouted,
Rosalie.
Layla.
A woman, presumably Rosalie, shouted back.
I didn't expect that to work.
Natalie whispered, Me either. Thaniel shook her head as a breeze ruffled her hair.
You weren't expecting what to work?
Misria asked as she landed on the hill next to her in full armor, of course. But she removed her helm and sent it away since she didn't need it right now. Then her eyes widened when she saw Arjanil.
I thought you were lost.
Misria flung her arms around Arjanil and Ezariah too, since he supported their exhausted friend.
Why does everyone keep saying that?
Arjanil asked as he gave her a one-armed hug. But that was probably a rhetorical question, because he disappeared for thousands of years, so what were they supposed to think during all that time?
What was I supposed to think?
Misri let go and stood back to study him. Don't you have a mortal to guard? Thaniel tapped her shoulder to get her attention.
Yeah, his sister is watching over him, so he's fine without me for a bit. But you're doing something interesting, and I want in. So spill. Why are you casing the gray between like a group of thieves?
Misria planted her hands on her hips, but her armor was angelic, so it didn't clink when she moved.
Boy, am I glad I found you,
said a brown-haired woman in a utilitarian dress as she appeared out of the fog and climbed up to join them. She must be Rosalie. She had that same otherworldly quality that ex-gods had. Like, part of her aura trailed after her. A fellow followed her. He was also an ex-god, but not one Thaniel knew.
I thought you went back to hell,
Natalie said as she stepped forward to greet the male ex-god. He was rather dramatic-looking with his black robes and the purple flames licking the ends of his black hair. The flames extinguished, but his eyes were swirly and the colors were inverted, making him look spooky. But otherwise, he had the same general build and facial features all the ex-gods shared. Who is he? Then he pointed at the odd-looking ex-god. Either he had dark circles under his eyes that turned black from lack of sleep, or he lined his eyes with a black substance, then smeared it under his eyes.
This is Uriah, former god of the underworld. Uriah, this is Thaniel.
Vitali made introductions for the rest of them too. At least his appearance made sense now. Uriah looked like death warmed over, but he grew less pale and the darkness in his eyes and under them receded the longer he stood there. So, maybe it wasn't makeup. Thaniel positioned herself so she could watch him, and in her peripheral vision, she saw Misria mirror her. That just made her smile. She and Misria were two of a kind sometimes. If only Misria would take a break from that guardian angel thing. What fun they could have.
And this is my friend Rosalie, the new ex-goddess of the present.
Layla caught the young woman's hand and pulled her forward. Rosalie looked about 20. Could she handle her new role? How did she become a goddess? Mortals couldn't do that, but she must have, or she wouldn't have that extra something the ex-gods had. What happened to the previous ex-goddess of the present? Rosalie looked solidly built, like she had some muscle on her bones. Was she strong enough to take on an ex-goddess and win without help? She must have been, since she won the mantle of power somehow, but what consequences would that have? Daniel listened to Rosalie's tale, but she shivered when a shadow passed over them. It was just a cloud, she told herself, but it felt like the future just waved at her, and the gray between seemed darker after that. I hope Layla knows what she's doing. Hopefully allying with these two ex-gods wouldn't prove to be a mistake, despite the warning swelling inside her. Maybe it was the war she fought long ago against their kind, making her distrust Rosalie and Uriah, but maybe it wasn't. I'll watch those two until I'm sure they aren't a threat.
Chapter 35, To Hell's Door. As Arjanil listened to Rosalie, his gaze strayed to the fog covering everything below. Somewhere out there a portal stood, and it led back to Hell and his library. I need to make sure it's still standing.
What are you thinking about?
Azariah whispered in his ear, and his breath tickled his skin because they were more corporeal than in heaven, but still not exactly flesh and blood. Arjanil was glad. It was weird having squishy bits that could bleed when cut, but he didn't want to think about that right now. Neither did he want to answer Azariah, not when they'd soon part for good again. I was just wondering if it really ended when we sent the adversary back to hell. Arjanil wasn't lying, since that was the other thought rattling around in his head. It just wasn't all he was thinking about.
Then I ran into this guy, and boy did he have a story to tell,
Rosalie said as she ended her account by pointing at Uriah, and that was just the distraction Arjanil needed.
And who is he?
Daniel folded her arms and glared at Uriah like she expected him to attack her at any moment.
He helped us toss the adversary back into hell, and I have a feeling he didn't come looking for us to tell us what a great job we did.
Natalie kicked at the grass in frustration.
Hang on, let me see if I have this straight.
Miss Rhea held both hands out in a stop gesture, then she pointed at Rosalie.
You went back in time, fought a rogue goddess with her help.
Miss Rhea pointed at Layla, and the angel nodded. Miss Rhea pointed at Arjanil, Thaniel, and Natalie.
Then you three figured out the adversary?
His name is Samuel, Arjanil said, and his lip curled in disgust as he slid out of Azariah's grip so he could stand on his own, as he'd done for thousands of years.
Whatever.
Miss Rhea waved off his explanation.
With help from him.
She paused long enough to point at Uriah.
And someone named Guerren, you three knocked the adversary Samuel whatever we're calling him today into a gateway. As it collapsed.
Miss Rhea paused again to gesture to herself, Thaniel, Arjanil, Azariah, and Natalie.
Then we fought an army attacking the pearly gates until some dragons showed up. And all this drama was over some fancy crystals? Have I missed anything?
That's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Daniel slung an arm around Miss Rhea's shoulders. The two had always been close, and a little too alike in some ways, which led them into trouble on plenty of occasions. This was probably another one.
It's a little more complicated than that.
Uriah shifted his weight uncomfortably as all eyes turned toward him. He looked a little different from their last meeting, unless a trick of the gray light made his eyes seem rimmed in black and his hair looked spiky like black flames rising from his head. I'm probably hallucinating from using too much of my light to keep everyone on the ship. Arjanil glanced away.
He's right.
Rosalie stepped in front of him and recaptured everyone's attention.
There's the whole thing about time imploding or exploding. I'm not really sure what will happen if we don't save the past somehow. Faye didn't explain that part, and I'd rather not experience it, so we need to save the current goddess of the past, a woman named Istiana.
Before we do that, we need to stop the adversary.
Uriah said into the quiet that fell after Rosalie stopped talking.
Explain that. What is he doing other than licking his wounds?
Daniel rested her hand on her hip, and her sword appeared sheathed around her waist. Worse still, Miss Rhea did the same thing, and her sword appeared too. They were too much sometimes.
Thank you for that alarming visual.
Miss Rhea released her sword and covered her face like she could wipe away the image if she tried hard enough.
That's why I came back. The adversary is throwing time crystals into the abyss under his palace to release their magic so he can use it. I shouldn't have to warn you what a bad idea that is. The creator scattered all the time crystals for a reason.
Uriah glanced at them like that should mean something, but Arjanil just stared at him like the others. He didn't know anything about an abyss.
So that's his plan. I saw demons jumping into portals, and I thought he was still collecting time crystals to break time
time if he ever got out of hell again. We need to stop him.
Layla pounded a fist into her open palm, then started down the hill toward the fog.
What's the abyss?
Natali hurried after her, and that broke their paralysis because everyone headed down the hill into the fog.
It's what was left over at the end of creation. That's the best way to explain it. It's everything that wasn't created, all the ideas never realized, all the stories never told, all the potential never used.
Layla picked up the pace until she was running.
So it's powerful stuff. It sounds like we need to get to hell fast. So why are we running when we can fly?
Daniel leaped off the hill and extended her wings to catch the wind, ruffling the fog.
That's a good question. Here, I'll carry you.
Natali extruded wings from their back and caught Uriah's arm as they flapped their wings. That was a good call because Thaniel didn't circle back to pick him up, and Misria followed her, matching her pace wingbeat for wingbeat.
I've got you.
Layla caught Rosalie around the waist and lifted her as she flew after them.
Thanks.
Rosalie said as she squeezed her eyes closed. She must not be a fan of flying. That left Argeniel and Azariah running down the hill like fools when they had wings too. Argeniel flapped his wings and rose slowly above the clingy fog. It didn't race past as he flew after the others, and he wouldn't win any races right now, not against such fast flyers as Misria and Thaniel. Azariah reached for him to help, probably, but he veered away. I can fly on my own. Argeniel knew he said the wrong thing when hurt flashed in Azariah's glowing violet eyes. I didn't mean it like that. Thank you for helping me before, but I need to fly on my own. I'm not used to having help. In hell, you can't show any weakness. Maybe he needed some space, too. This was all new territory and unstable emotional ground. Plus, Ez had been rather clingy since they reconnected. But they needed to function as a team right now, and that meant they both needed to pull their own weight and act independently.
I understand. I could give you a little space, too. I just don't want to lose you again. And the fear of that happening has my heart in a vice.
Azariah gripped his chest to demonstrate that. Argeniel knew he should tell Azariah that he wouldn't lose him again, but he didn't believe it. His friend knew nothing about his life in hell. He might not like me if he knew how I survived down there. Fear of that put him in a vice, too. They were two of a kind, like Thaniel and Misria, but they weren't as sword-happy as those two. Argeniel was glad he took to the sky when 12 smug and smiling dragons appeared out of the fog. He pulled up to miss their head spikes as they stomped toward the hill they just left and the sea beyond it.
Where are you going?
Azariah descended until he flew eye level with a blue dragon, who was large enough to swat him like an insect if the dragon wanted to.
Back to the sea. We drove out the invaders. Now we swim.
The dragon bared her teeth in what was hopefully a grin.
We could use your help to stop their boss in hell.
Azariah flew alongside the dragon as he made his pitch. Could he convince them to help?
Hell's no place for a dragon or an angel. You better leave him and his machinations where he can't hurt anyone but his own minions.
The dragon waved its scaly hand. Azariah dodged and flew back to where Argeniel hovered and waited for him. Ez shook his head, even though Argeniel heard every word and knew the dragons weren't coming to their aid this time.
I think they're still mad at Daniel and maybe Layla too.
Azariah said when he reached him. That's possible. They're both bossy in their own ways. Argeniel flew after them and hoped their little fellowship packed enough power to stop the adversary, and however many demons and fallen angels were still loyal to him. Ahead, the two warrior angels' silhouettes dived for something, probably the ground since they also liked to race toward it at top speed, then break right before they struck the ground. But they always nailed the perfect landing, so they probably didn't crash head first into the ground. I hope they didn't. They used to cut it awfully close when they were young angels learning to fight and fly. Argeniel doubted time had changed Misria or Thaniel enough to calm their need to test their limits all the time. Natali swooped down and landed more gracefully than the warrior angels and stepped carefully on the bones littering the ground. They let go of Uriah when they wobbled onto stable ground. Layla landed next to her and set Rosalie down. The formerly human woman grimaced as bones crunched under her boots. Argeniel landed behind them, and Azariah gave him space by landing by the warrior angels. Misria turned away from the smoking portal and glanced over the boneyard toward the foggy lands beyond it.
If you need to return to your mortal, you can. We've got this. I can find you afterward and tell you what happened.
Danielle bumped her hip into Misria. Since they were about the same height, they bumped hips.
I really shouldn't go to hell and leave him for too long, but I don't like the idea of you getting into trouble without me there to back you up.
Misria glanced at her friend, and her glowing violet eyes looked as torn as she must feel inside.
Don't worry, we've got her back.
Azariah gestured to him and Natalie while Layla studied the column of black smoke obscuring the portal.
That's what worries me.
Misria bit her lip.
Go back to the mortal world. You'll worry if you don't, and you'll drive me crazy. I'll find you afterward.
Daniel shoved Misria away from the portal to hell.
You promise?
Misria glared at Daniel as the other angel drew a cross over her heart.
I promise. Now, get out of here.
Daniel made shooing motions.
Wait, before you go, who's your mortal?
Rosalie tottered over to her, grimacing every time she stepped on a bone.
I doubt you'd know him, but I suppose there's no reason not to tell you. His name's Sarn, and he has such a darling little boy.
Misria sighed. Rosalie gripped her chest as she staggered toward Misria.
Is his son's name Rand?
Yes, how did you know that?
Misria manifested her sword, and this time it appeared in her hands, and she pointed it at Rosalie.
It's not what you think. Rand's my best friend. Well, he is in the future where I came from originally. That version of Rand helped me a lot.
Rosalie flung both hands up and held still as if she feared moving at all might incite Misria to violence. And it might. Misria liked to slash first and ask questions later.
We don't have time for this.
Layla grabbed Rosalie's arm and dragged her into the column of smoke. They both vanished, hopefully through the portal to hell, but that broke the impasse. Misria sent her blade away and looked at her armor-covered boots.
I'll just fly back to my mortal now.
Godspeed.
Daniel hugged her, then let go and back toward the column of thick black smoke.
We'll just head to hell now and take on the adversary again because once wasn't enough.
You'd better keep your promise.
Misria shook her index finger at Daniel, then turned and launched herself into the air. In 3 wing beats, she was just a metallic speck, fast disappearing into the gray sky.
I guess it's our turn. See you on the other side.
Natalie stepped into the fog next, followed by Uriah. In moments, they were the only ones left, and it was the moment he'd dreaded since meeting his friend again. Arjaniel fought the urge to stare at the bones under his sandals instead of at Azariah, but he forced himself to look at the angel in his glowing violet eyes. I guess this is goodbye.
No, it's just the beginning. From where I'm standing, I told you, where you go, I go. And I meant that, so let's go to hell and stop the adversary.
Azariah wrapped an arm around his shoulders and pulled him toward the smoke and the portal somewhere inside it. Hopefully it was easy to find. It must be, since none of their friends walked out of it. As it turned out, the portal was easy to find. Once they stepped into the smoke, the gray between vanished, but Azariah didn't, so they fell together through the flames. Just like that, Arjaniel was back in hell, but this time he wasn't alone. His friends flew ahead of him, and all he needed to do was follow them and not crash into Azariah or get their wings tangled, since Ez still had an arm around him. Then they needed to stop the adversary somehow and survive that. The smoke vanished, and they flew through a glowing orange sky, baking the rocky ground below. Many people moved around down there. Maybe that was the army the dragons chased out of the gray between. I wonder if Guerren is with them, and if he won them over yet, but he didn't swoop down to check, because that ex-god had a habit of turning up where he least expected him.
Chapter 36. When Vengeance Comes to Town. When the light died away, Avarian stood on a grassy field, next to a lot of tents arranged in rows with aisles between them. There were even lumer crystals tied to sticks stuck in the ground to light the way, but they weren't needed now, since it was the afternoon. Judging by the way the sun beat down on him, Mount Airdrin loomed over the meadow surrounding its rocky feet and threw its shadow over part of the tent village, just not the part where he stood.
Why are we on the meadow?
Sarn asked from where he sat on the ground, holding his squirming son. Every time Rand glanced at Advarian, guilt stabbed him, and he tried not to flinch. This Rand was just a little kid. He wasn't the adult who found him in a fading forest 16 years from now. Why don't you wish this all away? Avarian pressed his lips into a firm line and didn't ask that, because the answer was obvious. Rand was still small compared to his father, and he probably didn't have any magic yet. Thankfully, Sarn didn't have wish magic. Did he know that's what his son would have? Probably not.
A trial must be public for it to be effective.
effective and deter others from repeating the crimes you stand accused of.
Vangiana glanced about and nodded as passers-by stopped and gawked at the spectacle they made.
Couldn't we do this somewhere less public? We're drawing a crowd.
Sarn bowed his head, probably to hide his glowing green eyes. His son didn't need to do that because his eyes didn't glow, but they were just as vivid a green color despite that.
No, vengeance is a public affair. Come on, come all. Hear the truth if you dare.
Vangiana waved to the people peering out of their tents at her, and the glowing eye glyphs lifted from her arms and floated around her as she spun.
Perhaps you could tone it down a notch. This country doesn't welcome magic users. It persecutes them. After all, you don't want any interruptions. That would interfere with the proceedings.
Istiana pushed Vangiana's arms down and stopped her spin.
That's true. All right, I'll tone it down. What are the crimes he stands accused of anyway?
Vangiana waved her hands, and the tent city vanished as the world went white again. What did he do? He lived. Because of that, my friend and our timeline disappeared. I want a life for a life. Ivarian pointed at Sarn when the light of her teleportation spell faded.
I need more than that. Come here and explain yourself.
Vangiana waved for him to come forward. Ivarian staggered toward her. In his peripheral view, he thought he saw Morgana appear behind Sarn and his son. Whose side was she on anyway? Where did she go after they had dinner at that restaurant? His memories were still fuzzy about that.
You can't blame my brother for that. Living isn't a crime.
Miren followed Ivarian. He was pluckier than his brother and a fool to take on a demigod.
I'll be the judge of that.
Vangiana motioned for silence, and Sarn's brother shut his mouth.
Now you explain.
She pointed at Ivarian, but he stared at his mother. Silver motes flew away from her in clouds now as her end neared. She held her head high, and not a hint of fear marred her serene face. Maybe she was at peace after all. Tears pricked his eyes. I should save her. But Ivarian couldn't think of a way to do that. His family had one rule: they must obey, and he broke it. Jenar tried to warn me too, but I didn't listen. Now he was paying the price for it, since he too was fading. Bits flaked off and flew away too, though not as artistically as from his mother. But she was a full goddess, and he was half human. But that human half couldn't save him now.
Papa.
The child Ran shouted, and they all turned to find out why Ran sounded so scared. Sarn thrashed on the ground like he was having some kind of fit. What happened? He was just fine a moment ago. Now his eyes turned white and glowed so brightly they shot twin columns of light upward to stab the blue sky.
What's going on here?
Vangiana strode past Ivarian. Ran stood on his aunt's knees, since she sat on the ground beside her seizing brother and tried to corral his son.
Papa's having a seizure. You need to wait until he's better, then you can talk to him. Or you can talk to me. I'm his son. My name's Ran.
Ran extended his hand in greeting, and he was so earnest he reminded Ivarian of the adult Ran he knew in his own time. Did that time even exist anymore?
You can talk to me. My nephew is very brave, but he's still little.
Miren stepped in front of Ran.
Hey, I was handling things just fine.
Ran said, and he sounded cross. Sarn stilled, and white light shot out of every part of him, momentarily blinding Ivarian. Then a man-shaped cloud of white light appeared, and he cradled the mage for a moment, then set Sarn on his feet. Sarn swayed, but the man-shaped cloud of white light held him up.
He's trying to make a lie true,
said the man-shaped nimbus of white light as it pointed at Ivarian. Then it stepped into Sarn, and Sarn said,
We can't allow that.
Sarn pointed at Ivarian.
You lie. Show them the truth.
White light exploded from his fingers and struck Ivarian hard in the chest, and he staggered backward in shock. How could Sarn have two magical gifts? It's not fair that he has so much magic when I have so little. Ivarian summoned the cold from the arrow of time and threw a chunk of ice at Sarn with the hand that faded away. The ice struck the ground just short of Sarn because the mage staggered backward. But the ice expanded faster than he could dodge a second time, and it encased his sock-covered feet, freezing him in place.
There will be none of that in my courtroom.
Vangiana waggled a finger at him as another block of ice appeared in his hand.
Are you all right, son?
Mom caught him when he stumbled and held him up.
We've seen enough. It's time for justice, or vengeance. At this point, I think they're the same thing.
Vangiana rolled up her sleeves and spread her arms.
Oh come, season of vengeance, winter of woe.
Clouds blanketed the sky, and a chill wind blew past them, stealing the warmth from the summer afternoon.
Before you do that, I canceled the demon invasion, not him.
Sarn's sister appeared beside Sarn and handed over a scowling Ran to him.
Who are you?
Vandiana clenched her fists and looked like she wanted to take a swing at this new disturbance.
We're siblings.
Sarn's sister waved to him and a teenage version of Miren who stood nearby, watching everything.
And I'm his son.
Ran patted his father's chest to make his point.
If my brother says you lied, then you'd better tell the truth.
Miren appeared on Sarn's other other side.
Who really destroyed the spell circle?
It was a team effort between me and Robin,
Sarn said, and maybe he believed it too, but he was the mage, not Rosalie's mother. So Robin couldn't have helped him.
This is all a misunderstanding. There's no need for vengeance. Cancel this, please,
Mom said as Ivarian broke her grip and strode toward them, fists clenched for a fight.
Here, let me take him.
Mirren reached for Ran, and Sarn let him take the boy. Because of you two, Rosalie is gone. Ivarian shoved Sarn in the chest, and the ice around Sarn's feet vanished so he could stagger backward to catch his balance.
She's not dead. I don't know how I know that, but I do.
Sarn shook his head, but he sounded convinced of that. What are you saying? I saw her disappear when the spell circle broke. Ivarian staggered backward in shock. He extended his hand, and a glowing globe appeared on it. Inside that light, a window to the past opened. That damn spell circle appeared again. When it exploded, it shot glowing glyphs and magic everywhere. One glyph struck Rosalie as two silhouettes raced past her disappearing body. Now you're the one lying, Ivarian pointed at Rosalie as she faded. Rosalie died right there, and I lost her forever.
No, now you're lying. You didn't lose her forever.
Sarn grabbed Ivarian's wrist and stopped him from collapsing the globe of time magic.
Just wait a minute and I'll prove you're wrong.
Let it play. I want to see this too.
Vangiana stepped closer to view the scene in the light ball, but Mom didn't. She gripped her throat as her lips moved, but no sound came out. She wasn't choking because her eyes didn't bulge, and she seemed to breathe just fine. She just temporarily lost the ability to speak, and the effort to get past that invisible gag pulled her face into frustrated lines.
I want to see it too.
Ivarian almost shouted at Sarn's brother to bring the boy closer, but the thought of getting any nearer to the child who grew up to be a friend and rival made him uneasy, and his conscience shouted at him, "Stop all this! Let Sarn and his family go so they can enjoy the summery afternoon in peace." Ivarian pressed his lips together and said nothing when Sarn's brother told Ran no and stayed away from him.
How will you prove it?
Sarn's sister leaned in close and whispered a little too loudly.
You'll see. Let it play.
Sarn squeezed Ivarian's wrist when the image remained frozen. Well, nothing we see here changes anything. Ivarian tried to wrench his arm free.
Then you have no reason not to show us what happened next.
Sarn wouldn't let go until he gave in. At least he wasn't using his earth magic to crush his wrist, but he had powerful hands even without magic. Fine. Ivarian shook his head, and the people in the scene moved again.
Follow the two silhouettes. Just do it. Don't argue with me.
Sarn watched the images on the globe. When the light dimmed, the two silhouettes resolved into Sarn, holding a toddler-sized Ran, and Robin carrying an infant version of Rosalie and a black puppy.
Freeze the images right there.
Sarn pointed at Robin.
What are we looking at?
Vangiana examined the image.
That's me.
Ran shouted, proving he could see everything from where his uncle held him.
That's me, and that's my son. That's Robin and her daughter Rosalie. She's around my son's age by now, so Rosalie isn't dead. She's probably a different woman in your time. I suggest you leave us alone and go look for her.
Sarn let go of him and sat on a boulder.
You should brush up on your manners, though. A lady likes a mild-mannered gentleman, and this vengeance thing isn't a good look for you.
Sarn's sister gave him a dismissive glance before striding over to join her brother. Was Sarn right? No. I saw Rosalie die, but he also saw a version of her alive, too. Could there be another Rosalie out there waiting for him? No. I saw multiple copies of her from multiple timelines die the same way, but time didn't collapse since he ended up here 4 years later after his trip to the Grey Between and Hell to fetch the crystal that trapped Vangiana and her family. Could his timeline have collapsed and a new one taken its place? One where Rosalie lived? You can't be right. You must be lying. Ivarian pulled the glowing ball close to his chest and images raced around inside it.
Not. It's easier to blame me than to find her and start over.
Sarn rubbed his face.
I think we're done here,
Mom said as she touched the light ball and it vanished. She looked sad and drained, and she faded so much she was transparent now.
Let's go, son. You've bothered them enough.
But he can't go. He ordered vengeance, then made a false statement to me. That can't go unpunished.
Vangiana raised both arms, and a chill wind whipped past them, but there was nothing she could do to him that was worse than losing Rosalie or accidentally causing his mother's death. Pain throbbed in his chest every time he thought of them. Ivarian squared his shoulders and locked his knees. Whatever she threw at him, he would meet it on his feet like a man. Let her do her worst.
You've been listening to Storm the Gates, Book 3 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy by Melinda Kucsera. Subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when the next part publishes. The Rogue Gods Trilogy is available as an ebook and paperback, and now a full cast audiobook. Click the link in the description to order your copy. If you love the Rogue Gods Trilogy, then you'll love Melinda's other epic fantasy adventure books too. They're just as full of magic and mayhem and characters who will do anything to achieve their goals. Check them out at the link in the description, and while you're there, sign up for her newsletter so her characters can talk directly to you. Thank you for listening.